All right. Thank you again for being here with me this morning. My name is Tina Wahardo. I'm a registered dietitian and health educator with Bronson Community Health. Welcome to today's free virtual healthy living class. Today is November 2nd, and our topic today is are you eating less vegetables during the cooler months? Does that tend to be your trend during the cooler months? Well, I'm hoping that today's presentation and at the end of our cooler months, you can say not anymore. And hopefully you learned a few tips along today's class to increase your winter veggie consumption. So again, thank you guys so much for being here. I look forward to our class today. All right, so as we start all of our classes here with Bronson Community Health, we want to make sure that as a community, you are familiar and aware with some of the resources that we have at Bronson to achieve best care. And that first resource that you're seeing on your screen is the Find a Doctor feature or a specialist here at Bronson. You can search for a provider that is either accepting new patients. You can find a provider that is specializing in a certain area, all on our bronsonhealth.com website. Or if you prefer to have a phone conversation, you can call the care advisors at the phone number listed. If you are a Bronson client, then you may have access and may have used MyChart in the past. It is essentially our electronic medical record for us to be able to see our test results and lab values and orders from our provider. And if you ever have any needs with MyChart, whether it be technical assistance, just have questions on where to find something, then Bronson Health Answers is the department that you would go to for that need. If you ever have any patient billing questions, then we've got patient accounting available. If you've got billing questions, you've received a bill and you've got some concerns, or if you need to set up a payment plan, then that is who you would reach out to. Lastly, we've got our price estimator tool that you can be utilized through the MyChart, whether you have an active MyChart or not, or you can call the price estimator team. And what this service does is if your provider has referred you to a service, maybe an X-ray, an MRI, then you can call this phone number and kind of get an understanding of what your out-of-pocket expense for that procedure would be. All right. So again, thank you guys for being with me today. These are going to be our goals. This is what I'm hoping that we were going to go over. So today we're going to discuss the benefits of eating seasonally and how to do so during the fall and winter months here in the great state of Michigan. And above and beyond that, we're also going to talk about some of the nutritional value that some of these winter vegetables offer to us. And I'm hoping that you will leave today with 2 new ideas to use more vegetables during these colder months, especially if you find yourself not eating as many vegetables during these months. So, icebreaker question to get us started. Go ahead and unmute yourself and share your answer to this question, or simply chat it in the chat box there. But what is your favorite thing to do during the cooler months? I want to hear what some of your favorite things to do are during the cooler months. Type it in the chat or unmute if you want to share with us. Ooh, Penny says golf in Florida. Sounds great. Can't be a golf course. Blue skies, green grass. Knitting. That sounds like a great cooler month activity as well. Hanging out with the dogs and oh yes, hot chocolate. I busted out a cup of hot chocolate the other night. It was definitely cold enough for it. Take a walk in the woods. Yes, the woods are a great place to be right now, aren't they? I just love this picture that's on the screen of this dog with his sunglasses and enjoying all those pretty colors. Walking in the woods. I agree. I love seeing the pretty colors. Very good. Thank you guys so much for sharing. All right. So we know that vegetables are very important to our health, right? You've heard that time and time again. We don't have to repeat that statement. But I think one of the most important things is that we also recognize the recommendations for how many vegetables we should be aiming for. So I just have a few starter questions to get us started in our class today. Maybe you've asked yourself, how many vegetables am I supposed to be eating on a typical day? And that recommendation varies depending upon how many calories that we might be needing per day, just kind of depending upon our age range and how active we are on a day-to-day basis. However, most adults should be aiming for about 3 cups of vegetables every day. Sometimes people will ask me, cups, serving size, portions, what's the difference? And then what is considered 1 cup when we are looking for a 3-cup recommendation every day? So 1 cup differs depending upon the type of vegetable. If you're using a raw or a cooked version vegetable, then that would be 1 cup is considered 1 cup when we're looking at our 3 cups of vegetables. But if we're doing raw leafy greens like, collards or spinach, arugula, romaine, those dark leafy green vegetables, then actually 2 cups serving of those raw leafy greens would be considered a 1 cup serving size when we're trying to aim for 3 cups of vegetables that we should be working towards every single day. And not only have we heard, obviously, that vegetables are important, but we've also heard that we need to eat the rainbow, right? A couple of months back, we had the cancer care dietitian with us and how to eat the rainbow for cancer prevention. Eating the rainbow provides us lots of benefits, and one of those benefits in getting all those different colors from our vegetables is that it helps decrease the risk of a cancer diagnosis. So we know we need to eat the rainbow. That is a very good recommendation and something to be striving for. But taking that 1 step further, how do we break that down when we're eating the rainbow? So the Dietary Guidelines for All Americans recommends that for dark green vegetables, so again, we're thinking collards, we're thinking arugula, we're thinking spinach and kale, dark green leafy vegetables, we should be striving for 1.5 cups of dark green vegetables each week. So 1.5 cups each week is how the Dietary Guidelines for Americans break it down on a weekly basis here. So red and orange vegetables, which when we start talking about seasonal produce in Michigan, we're going to see that we've access to quite a few orange vegetables during the winter months. So red and orange vegetables, we should be eating 5.5 cups of red and orange vegetables each week. How many of us are doing that right now? Type in the chat if you think you're eating 5.5 cups of red and orange vegetables each week. I think that one's a challenge personally. So if you're doing that, great job. In regards to starchy vegetables, so starchy vegetables means a little bit more starch, a little bit more carbohydrate, and I want to speak a little bit on that with us today. But some of those starchy vegetables are corn, peas, potatoes, and some of the winter squash that we're going to talk about today. So, maybe you've heard negative things about corn and potatoes, but I want to talk about how beneficial those starchy vegetables actually can be. And the Dietary Guidelines for Americans recommend that we be getting 5 cups of those starchy vegetables per week as well, which is perfect because it gives us the ample opportunity to include more of those winter squash in the coming months. And then all other vegetables kind of fall into that other category of 4 cups per week, right? So, I think about things like, okay, iceberg lettuce is a vegetable that falls into the 4 cups a week, or, cucumbers, maybe cauliflower, those kind of fall into the 4 cups each per week. If they're not a dark green vegetable, a red or orange, or a starchy vegetable, then we don't necessarily have specific guidelines on those. So what are the benefits to seasonal eating? Well, it is a little bit easier, I think, for all of us during the warmer months when we have more access to farmers markets on a regular weekend basis or weekday basis. Maybe we are growing our own produce in our garden, or we're doing pots on our back. In fact, a little easier to get some of that seasonal produce into our diet. But during the winter months, we still have opportunities for that. There are particular and specific winter markets. I'm going to put a link in the chat for you guys if you guys are interested in taking a look at this link. This is the Michigan Farmers Market website in which you can search your location and find a farmers market during your winter month. So if you're looking for, just the ability to be able to purchase a little bit more seasonally from a local grower, that would be one resource for you to do that. Seasonal eating, when we were trying to work towards increasing that seasonal produce, we are supporting our local growers in our area. And yes, we talk about local growers, from a gardening perspective, an agricultural perspective. But the nice thing about some of the abilities and advancements in agriculture is that now we can kind of extend that growing season a little bit more in Michigan with the use of greenhouses and hoop houses, where we can, grow more, hardy lettuces and those sorts of things. So there is more ample opportunity for that. Additionally, when we are eating seasonally, we are really enjoying that fresh produce at the peak flavor and nutrition, right? It is most nutritious when it is grown seasonally, picked and eaten rather than transported, and therefore less costly produce as well when we don't have to count in transportation costs and we are purchasing it more local. In the month of November, and there are really good guides for you guys. We put all of our class summaries out on our Bronson Eats website. If you've never been there, it's on bronsonhealth.com. Just type in Bronson Eats and you will see a class summary for all of the classes that we have done. And again, all of our recordings for our classes are there as well. So I will include this information on my class summary that I have placed on the Bronson Eats website. But additionally, there are really good resources and websites available. So you can always be checking to see what is in season based upon the month for the state of Michigan. But during the month of November in Michigan, and again, not that these are necessarily grown fresh or in that way, but we have access to a lot of storage crops like, apples that have been grown in the past few months and been able to be stored for our consumption throughout the colder months. So those storage crops are quite beneficial, but we have some hardier vegetables too in the month of November, like broccoli and Brussels sprouts and cabbage, and those more root vegetables like carrots, got celery and mushrooms, sweet potatoes. Mushrooms are a really great source. When I was talking about like the greenhouse and the hoop house ability, we have access to mushrooms quite often for that reason. So these are some in-season vegetables during the month of November, and then kind of extending beyond November, looking at what we have access to for the rest of the winter. I was mentioning apples and beets and pears, those salad greens that I was talking about, so kale and spinach, collards, arugula, really great nutritious options that we still have access to in our winter months of Michigan. When I was mentioning, starchy vegetables and the recommendations for those starches, I just wanted to take a minute to talk about that, right? I think historically carbohydrates have gotten a bad reputation in the past, and I just want to talk about that for a minute because some of the vegetables that we have access to during the winter months have a little bit more carbohydrates in them because they lend themselves to be a starchier vegetable. So if you're looking at the screen here, and we see on this left-hand side, I've got listed our starchy vegetables that are seasonal to Michigan: potatoes, sweet potatoes, butternut squash, acorn squash, and pumpkin, right? Very nutritious seasonal vegetables, but just a higher starch content. Keep in mind that that might be the case, but let's also recognize the fact that those starchy vegetables are also part of, especially, those orange vegetable category that we should be eating more of. I think that was 5.5 cups a week that we should be eating red and orange vegetables. So that is a recommendation for a reason, because those orange vegetables provide us with a lot of antioxidants, specifically vitamin C and vitamin A, that can really decrease our risk of certain diseases. So that is beneficial. So it comes with a lot of nutrition, comes with a lot of fiber, despite the fact that there's just a little bit more starch. And we can balance our meals utilizing some of these starchy vegetables while also pairing them and maybe having recipes with the counterpart of a non-starchy vegetable. And so if we're looking at the presentation again on the right-hand side here, we've got a list of non-starchy vegetables that we have access to in the cooler months in Michigan, like the greens and the broccoli and the cauliflower. The cabbage, the Brussels sprouts, the mushrooms, right? We can still balance out our meals utilizing some starch, but also balancing it with those non-starchy vegetables, all while trying to achieve our 3 cups of vegetables each day. All right, so as I mentioned, some of these vegetables are really good vitamin C sources, and vitamin C is a really great vitamin nutrient for our immune system, right? We've heard many things about vitamin C and how it can impact our immune system, but it also acts as an antioxidant, meaning that it is fighting against harmful things in our body that can increase our risk of maybe certain cancers or other diseases. So a great benefit in utilizing these particular seasonal produce items. One thing we don't think about very often when it comes to vitamin C sources is that it also can help improve how much iron your body can absorb from plant iron sources. And by plant iron sources, I am referring to items like legumes, right? Black beans, garbanzo beans, kidney beans, or whole grains like, quinoa, nuts and seeds. Those are iron sources that are coming from plants, which look a little bit different than the iron that we might get from like a red meat. It's not as easily absorbed, but having vitamin C with those items like beans and nuts and seeds can help increase the absorption of the iron from that plant source. So some examples of vitamin C sources that we have from Michigan seasonal produce here. We've got broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, and cabbage, right? So much more than just the orange that we think of, or the orange juice as a vitamin C source. We are getting vitamin C from some of these dark green vegetables here as well. So, fun fact, if we were to eat 1 cup of broccoli or even 1 cup of kale, that equates out to almost 100% of our daily vitamin C needs. I think that's pretty amazing. So most adults need between about 75 and 90 milligrams of vitamin C on a daily basis, just as recommended dietary intake of vitamin C, where a cup of broccoli or a cup of kale is about 75 to 80 milligrams. So that's why I said about 100% of our vitamin C needs just from 1 cup of kale or 1 cup of broccoli. So I want to hear from you guys. My question to you, again, unmute and share or type it in the chat for me. But what is your favorite way to use cabbage, right? We talked about cabbage as being a green leafy vegetable. It is one of our seasonal produce items, and cabbage is also a good source of vitamin C. What's your favorite way to use it? I want to hear from you. Cabbage soup, perfect. Homemade coleslaw, yes. Classic. I'm going to speak on slaws in a little bit too, so that's exciting. Anybody else using cabbage? Boiled dinner, that's good. I've actually never made boiled dinner, but I hear a lot about it. So cabbage and ham and carrot. Great, 2 of you guys using boiled dinner. Coleslaw and stir fries. Oh, let's think about putting cabbage in stir fries. That's a great idea. I usually don't, but in the cancer, Eat the Rainbow for Cancer Prevention. It's on our YouTube, bronsonhealth.com YouTube page. If you look at the wellness classes, there's the recording of the Eat the Rainbow for Cancer Prevention class. And she does a stir fry, now that I think about it, using red cabbage in the stir fry. In soup, as an add-on, yes, just a saute of cabbage for the side of your meal is great. Coleslaw, cabbage rolls, making it in a cabbage roll, but in layers. Okay, interesting, yes. And so my favorite way to use cabbage, my mom and I have been doing some Polish cooking, and so stuffed cabbage rolls, or glumpki, if I pronounce that correctly, is I think probably my favorite way to use cabbage. So very good. It's such a versatile option and so inexpensive. So a really great powerhouse really when it comes to antioxidants. So one of the things that we have access to in Michigan. Thank you guys so much for sharing. All right, so then when we look at all these produce options that we have in the great state of Michigan, we also think about how great fiber sources they are. We know that our fruits and vegetables, our whole grains, and our beans are all good fiber sources. And the reason why we encourage fiber as something that we should be eating, again, most people should be aiming for, 28, 30 grams of fiber on a daily basis. And the benefit to eating that much fiber is really for overall health. In general, we know that it can be linked to, decreased risk of certain cancers like colon cancer if we're eating adequate fiber amount. Fiber can also be very helpful in decreasing our blood cholesterol levels. If we are living with any like maybe diabetes or blood sugar control issues in general, then fiber actually is a slower digesting carbohydrate. And so that can be helpful in that blood sugar control overall. So there are many benefits to increasing our intake of fiber. So what do we have access to in the seasonal produce in Michigan that are really good fiber sources? We've got apples and pears. Obviously, I realize this is a veggie class, but why not talk about how great fiber content are in apples and pears? And then sweet potatoes and winter squash and broccoli and Brussels sprouts are really good options for our fiber sources as well. And winter squash is kind of that big terminology for butternut and acorn squashes. Oh, here's another fun fact for you guys. So one apple, which has got about 5 to 6 grams of fiber in it, meets about 16% of our recommended fiber needs. And 1 cup of Brussels sprouts would also be about the same amount of fiber, meeting about 16% of our daily fiber needs. So 16% is as big as the previous set that I had on the vitamin C, but it all adds up, and we need to kind of spread that fiber out throughout all of our meals. So having an apple at breakfast and having broccoli with lunch and a sweet potato at dinner are really good ways in which we can use seasonal produce in all of our meals, but also spread out that fiber. So my next question for you guys is then, how do you like to use Brussels sprouts in your meals? Unmute to share or type it in the chat. How do you like to use Brussels sprouts in your meals? I personally love Brussels sprouts, but I know, Robin already says, I don't use them, but I know that this is a controversial subject right here. Brussels sprouts, you either love them or you hate them. I'm seeing a lot of roasted. Anybody else do anything different with their Brussels sprout? Okay, she says, we got a comment in the chat, just introduced to them in a roasted way, shaved in a salad, sauteed or roasted, very good. Shaved in the salad, and one of the recipes that I'll go over in a little bit, shaved down for a slaw recipe as well. So I thought that was a fun option. All right, very good. Only one of you guys came out that said you didn't like the Brussels sprouts. I'm kind of surprised. That's great. All right, and then, all right, husband loves them, me not so much. I understand that. All right, and then these these produce items that I'm speaking on are also really good potassium sources. Now we get potassium really from all fruits and vegetables. Some are just better sources of potassium than others. Potassium is a very important nutrient that we should be getting in our diet as well. Most adults need between 26 and 3,400 milligrams of potassium per day. This one can be challenging because some people have very specific requirements to how much potassium. So if you're unsure about this, obviously speak with your doctor about it. But potassium is a nutrient. It is very helpful in maintaining good, healthy blood pressure and just overall proper muscle function. Very specifically, also very beneficial in regulating our heartbeat. So an important nutrient in potassium. If you've ever heard of the DASH diet, right, the dietary approaches to stop hypertension, it is very heavy on fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. And that's because of the high potassium content is very helpful in regulating that good, healthy blood pressure. So what do we have available in Michigan that's really good potassium source? Well, again, we've got that winter squash, right? Butternut and acorn. Spinach is a good potassium source. Potatoes, right? Yes, the white potato, the sweet potato, the collard greens, and the cauliflower are all good potassium sources. So fun fact, 1 cup of cooked butternut squash has about 582 milligrams of potassium, 582. And I said that most adults need between 2,600 and 3,400 milligrams. So that's about 22% of your daily potassium needs just from 1 humble cup of cooked butternut squash. If we compared that even to spinach, right? 1 cup of cooked spinach is about 839 milligrams of potassium. So again, I know these are just numbers, but important to realize the impact that even just a small quantity can have on our overall health, needs and goals. All right, next question for you guys. Have you ever tried acorn squash? And if so, how do you like to use the acorn squash? Again, unmute to answer or go ahead and type your answer in the chat. This is one I don't use very often, acorn squash. So I'd be curious to see what kind of ideas you guys have. Oh, nothing yet. Does that mean you guys aren't lovers of acorn squash? Oh, okay. Now we're getting some baked with maple syrup. Yum. Love it. Bake it with nutmeg, cinnamon, light brown sugar, and a piece of, I don't know if that says bacon. Piece of bacon, maybe. Baked with butter. Yes, delicious. Roasted and stuffed with veggies. Roasted and stuffed with veggies. Very good. As a child, my mom would put it in the oven to roast, then add either sugar with butter or honey, but I have not eaten it in a while. Yes, bacon. All right, very good. All right. It sounds like it needs butter and sugar is what you guys are telling me. Very good. Acorn squash. Yes. I'm not an ingredient I use very often, but you guys shared some good ideas here. Baked with butter, nutmeg, and cinnamon. That sounds really, really good. Yeah. And the maple syrup idea. I like that idea too. Wish we can get some good Michigan maple syrup. So there's another plug for that, right? Awesome. Thank you guys. All right, so now let's actually talk about meals. All right, so we strive for 3 cups of vegetables a day. That is our goal. And breakfast, I think we don't often think about utilizing vegetables at breakfast. So I wanted to offer some ideas, at least, for including some of our seasonal produce in our breakfast meal. So the first idea here, and I'm going to put all of these links here for the vegetable for the breakfast in the chat, so you guys have access to these. I'm going to try to get them on the class summary sheet as well, but let me put those in the chat. So all three of these links are now in the chat for you guys. So the first link that erinliveswhole.com, a sweet potato egg breakfast casserole. Now, breakfast for personally, the most challenging meal of the day for me, to get up and prepare something nutritious at least, right? And still be able to get out the door. So it is nice to have a casserole available that you've only just cooked once, cut into squares, and all you have to do is kind of just rewarm it, and to know that that casserole is nutritious and balanced from a protein perspective, and also have vegetables in there too. This specific egg breakfast casserole uses sweet potatoes and onions as part of some of those winter options that we can utilize from Michigan. And then we've got those muffin tin omelets. I'm not sure if you guys have ever used those before, right? But using a muffin tin, you've got your egg mixture and you're filling up each muffin tin and then baking it into the little snack size, mini size omelets of sorts. So this specific one from Eating Well, which is a really great resource that I highly recommend you guys take a look at, eatingwell.com, great recipes that can be very disease specific. So if you're looking for healthy blood pressure recipes, you're looking for high fiber, blood sugar friendly recipes, Eating Well will narrow all of those down for you. But these Greek muffin tin omelets, very Mediterranean diet inspired, in the sense that these omelets include egg, yes, of course, but there were some Kalamata olives in there, there was feta, there was peppers, there was spinach. So, you know, we've got spinach from Michigan in winter that we can utilize in this sort of recipe. And then a smoothie, maybe a quicker option, didn't have to bake anything, but those first two are kind of planning in advance for the week. You can make a casserole on the weekend and have that available, eat off of for the rest of the week. And the same with those little mini muffin tin omelets. Those can actually go really well in the freezer, and then just warming them up as you need them to. But, you know, smoothies can be a really good option. You know, just kind of brainstorming for some of the smoothie ideas for this class. You know, we see a lot of like green smoothies where, you know, it's avocado and spinach and kale, and if that's a little bit more intimidating, then I recommend trying a smoothie recipe that kind of utilizes some of like that dark green leafy vegetable like a spinach or a kale, but in combination with something a little bit more sweet, like a peanut butter and a banana. Kind of help mask that spinach flavor a little bit if you're feeling a little unsure about utilizing a dark green leafy vegetable in a smoothie. So again, that's also from Eating Well. So those are my you know, fun breakfast ideas for us to utilize our Michigan produce. So let's move on to lunch. So I'm going to put these in the chat as well. So let me copy those real quick for you guys. Here are my two main ideas for lunch to utilize a Michigan produce is a stir fry. Yep, Jill says add a banana to green smoothies. Absolutely. You gotta get that little sweetness in there. I think it would make it a little bit more fun. All right, so you got 4 links in your chat right now for these recipes for lunch. My main ideas are stir fries and grain bowls, right? They're versatile. You can change them up depending upon what vegetable you were able to purchase that week, what you have available in your refrigerator. And so first we've got a stir fry. And actually, I think both of these recipes right here are utilizing tofu as the protein component in both of these stir fry recipes. So whether you enjoy tofu or not, or have never had it, then maybe that would be a great option to try tofu. But any of those can be replaced, obviously, if you wanted to do a garbanzo bean instead of the tofu, or if you want to do chicken or shrimp or beef, you can interchange those things. So that Oh My Veggies website for the winter vegetable stir fry utilizes mushrooms and carrots and broccoli. We heard from one of you on the chat that you also like to use cabbage in the stir fry, and so that could be an option you could add in there if you have some leftover cabbage from another recipe. that New York Times website has the stir-fried tofu with that red cabbage in it. So fun, colorful red component when we're trying to eat 5.5 cups of red and orange vegetables each week. And then it also has, I think they're using butternuts. Yes, butternut squash in that recipe as well. So not only red cabbage, but we've got that orange winter squash, providing another orange vegetable when we're trying to meet our goals in that area. That's also providing us vitamin C and vitamin A as an antioxidant and keeping us healthy during the colder months. Who's had grain bowls before? Type in the chat if you've had a grain bowl before. I think they're more common these days, so I just want to hear if you guys have had the grain bowl before. Again, it can be quite versatile. Essentially, you've got a grain as your base to the meal. And grain, I mean, maybe it's a brown rice, maybe it's a wild rice. It could be quinoa. You could even have some of the more other ancient grain options like, bulgur or buckwheat. So you've got lots of variety from what you want your base to be for the grain bowl. And then from there, you can add in whatever protein, again, shrimp, tofu, garbanzo beans, chicken, maybe you've got left over from the night before, and then really putting any sort of roasted vegetable that you might have available. Maybe you had some roasted vegetables left over from your dinner the night before that you want to add to the grain bowl. And so the first one here, this Pinch of Yum website, actually uses beets and sweet potatoes. So red, orange, right? Beets and sweet potatoes is the theme of the day, red and orange. And then the Joyful Healthy Eats, roasted vegetables, that is red and yellow peppers, red onions, there's carrots in that recipe, and cauliflower. So again, all roasting those vegetables and just putting them with one grain bowl. All right, so Jill says, yes, we had one with quinoa. Yes, quinoa is a great option for the grain bowl. All right, and then let's look at some dinner ideas. So what can we do with the Michigan seasonal produce for dinner? My ideas here, I thought some good recipes that you guys could take a look at. I'm putting those ones in the chat as well. There's 2 links in the chat. The first one is a butternut squash carbonara with broccoli. I was actually quite surprised in looking at this recipe in the fact that it had a pretty good amount of protein in it. So the serving size was 1 1/4 cup and it provided 15 grams of protein. There is a little bacon in this recipe, but there is also an egg included as well in the sauce. And so what makes this recipe a little bit different is that the noodles in the carbonara is actually butternut squash noodles. So utilizing our winter squash to make noodles as a nutritious option that way, instead of using an actual pasta noodle. This recipe also utilizes broccoli and, keeping the bacon or not, that would be fine. And if you wanted to make it a complete meal, then again, you pair it with a little bit of chicken or maybe even a side of shrimp. And then you get your vegetable from your butternut squash, and then that's the starchy vegetable component, while also pairing it with the non-starchy vegetable component of the broccoli. So really there's only 23 grams of carbohydrate, and that's a good nutritious carbohydrate right there from the butternut squash. So fun option. The next one is utilizing more like a 1 sheet pan meal. So roasted autumn vegetables with a chicken sausage. The Michigan vegetables utilized in this recipe are Brussels sprouts, red onion, and butternut squash again. So now we've got, a dark green, we've got a red and an orange all in this recipe, roasted autumn vegetables, while we're utilizing the starchy vegetable component from the butternut squash, but also pairing it with non-starchy vegetables like red onions and Brussels sprouts. We're really marrying those 2 concepts together, and it quite works out wonderfully. So those are roasting those vegetables all on 1 sheet pan with the chicken sausage. And I'm going to have some additional tips for sheet pan meals in just a minute. All right. So were any of those recipes intriguing to you? Are you wanting to try any of them? If so, Type it in the chat. Which one of those recipes are you eager to make at home? You've got them all in your chat now. Personally, I really thought the stir-fried tofu with red cabbage and winter squash was the one that I kind of gravitated towards. That one I thought sounded really good. But I do love a sweet potato breakfast casserole. Jill says all of them, very good. Anybody else? Stir fry and the mini tuna omelets for breakfast. Yep. One from each section. Oh, that's good. Helping you is with your grocery lists this week. All right, very good. And so in the picture on the slide here, we've got a picture essentially of a grain bowl, right? If you've never had a grain bowl before, didn't necessarily understand the concept, right? We've got quinoa actually in that picture, and that is paired with some kale. It's got some butternut squash. It's got some microgreens, it looks like, on the top, and then those are probably roasted garbanzo beans. So remember, I was talking about how our vitamin C sources from that butternut squash help increase the absorption of the iron from our dark green leafy vegetables like kale, and the iron from the quinoa. That picture right there is a perfect example of how that butternut squash is helping increase the absorption of the plant-based iron from the kale and the quinoa. All right. So let's talk about some more tips to increase some more of these vegetables into our meals this winter. We've talked a lot about fresh produce so far, but veggies that have been frozen are obviously a really great option. They're low sodium, and they can be such a time saver on those busy days. They also can be very budget friendly, right? So if you are intimidating by squashes, because they're quite hard, they might be a little bit more challenging to cook. You can buy a bag of frozen cubed already butternut squash, and you can steam that, and it'd just be a whole lot easier. And I was actually just looking at one of the grocery store's website this morning. You can buy a bag of cubed butternut squash for $1.49. I mean, you just can't beat that. So frozen is a good option too, and can be added to any side to any meal, just like you guys were mentioning, adding just a side of cabbage to a meal. So that's an option. But those frozen vegetables can be thrown into any sort of soup or stew that you might be making, or just to be steamed and placed onto any one of those grain bowls that we were talking about as well. We mentioned one of those butternut squash carbonara with broccoli recipes utilized veggie noodles, right? So looking at noodles in a different way, maybe you guys have done this. If so, share maybe about your experience in using veggie noodles. It can be a great option. Again, getting more vitamins and minerals from that noodle dish with less of the carbohydrates, or at least less of the pasta, if that is a goal for you. And so veggie noodles can be made if you have a spiralizer. So you need a veggie noodle spiralizer in order to make the noodle form. But if you don't have a spiralizer, you can always use a mandolin slicer. Or I didn't have a spiralizer for the longest time, and I just used my veggie peeler. And so I would make ribbons instead of noodles, right? So like a long, thicker type of ribbon rather than an actual skinny noodle. That works totally fine if you don't have a spiralizer. And you can turn butternut squash, sweet potatoes, or carrots into veggie noodles. And if you, don't necessarily want to take the time to make that veggie noodle yourself, you can also buy those frozen at the store as well to utilize that. Spiralized beets in a salad. I didn't think about spiralizing beets. Great, thank you. And then spaghetti squash, you don't necessarily have to spiralize that one. Once you roast that and cook that, that pretty much shreds up just like noodles on its own. So that can be used as a replacement for noodles in some of those dishes. And so you can use these veggie noodles in anything to replace a pasta, right? So if maybe you've got pasta in a casserole, instead of using the pasta, you could use the veggie noodle. The veggie noodle can be the base of your stir fry. That's what I historically have done, using the ribbons with a zucchini, summer squash, but zucchini ribbons for a stir fry can be a great option, or in any sort of stovetop pasta dish, right? I'm thinking like spaghetti and meatballs. It's quite common, in some of the recipes that you can find now, to be using spaghetti squash instead of a spaghetti noodle. So we've got a question. On the frozen vegetables, do they lose any vitamins and or flavors? When we are, well, okay. So I think the question is, when they are frozen, do they lose any vitamins or flavors? Say no, for the most part, right? Those vegetables are picked at, peak ripeness and flash frozen quite quickly. And so therefore, all of those vitamins are being retained for the most part. If we are boiling the frozen vegetable for a longer period of time, then we might lose some of those nutrients. But we're still getting quite beneficial impact from utilizing those frozen vegetables. So I hope that answered your question. If not, feel free to ask additionally. Thank you. All right, and then some of you guys talked about coleslaw, right? Coleslaw using cabbage was one of the ways that you guys enjoyed using your cabbage. And I have never done this, but there's a lot of recipes out there in utilizing winter vegetables for a slaw, so a winter veggie slaw. And these are utilizing mostly root vegetables like carrots and radishes and parsnips, and celery root's not an ingredient I use very often, but maybe you guys have experience with that, cabbage and Brussels sprouts. I'm actually going to be teaching a virtual cooking class next week in which I am featuring Brussels sprouts. So maybe, Robin, you won't be attending that one because you don't use them, but if you're looking for some good ideas, feel free to register for that class, because I am going to be making a Brussels sprout slaw. And so I am very much looking forward to that class. And that's just a creative way to use some of our winter veggies. Again, that slaw can be used, again, just as a side to any meal. You could top that, that slaw on top of any sort of salad as well. It could even be part of a grain bowl. And then sheet pan meals. Well, it's supposed to say sheet pan meals, not plan meals. Sheet pan, one sheet pan meals. Does anybody utilize one sheet pan meals? I've got a link there. I'll put it in the chat from, again, eatingwell.com, where there are 20 different ideas to use one sheet pan meals. What an easy option for, when you just don't have a lot of time. You don't want a lot of cleanup. All you need is just this one baking sheet. You put your meat on there and you put all your vegetables on there. You roast it, and voila, you are done. You have dinner served. One tip here is that you'll have to be very mindful of what vegetables you are utilizing in this one sheet pan meal, because some vegetables are just going to take longer to cook than others, right? So when I was talking about that concept of using starchy and non-starchy vegetables, those starchy vegetables like the butternut squash, the sweet potato, they're going to need to cook longer than a non-starchy vegetable like broccoli or green beans or asparagus. So you would start out that recipe by putting your more dense vegetables like the butternut squash and the sweet potato on the pan initially, and maybe roast that for 30 minutes with your piece of meat, like chicken legs or whatever it is that you might be utilizing, and then just throwing in your non-starchy vegetable like the green bean, the asparagus, the broccoli for the last 15 minutes to roast, so then you don't have mushy broccoli in the end. And then those frozen vegetables that we were talking about are really great options, obviously just to steam, but to throw them into any of the soups that we might be making, right? The slow cooker, it's the perfect time of year right now to be pulling that out, or if you're a diehard slow cooker lover, maybe you're using that all year round. But I found this slow cooker white bean stew recipe that looked really good that I thought I would share with you guys. So I'm putting that one in the chat too. And that one uses carrots and onions and kale. If you're not so certain about kale, maybe you're still a little hesitant about it, you know, it really is a little bit more palatable when it is, you know, cooked down softer in like a soup option, or maybe more of like a summer option. If you've seen some of the kale salads that are like massaged, you know, you've got your shredded kale or your chopped up kale, and you've got olive oil drizzled over top of it. You just use your hands to kind of massage and soften up that kale. That's a little bit more palatable than just raw kale. So that's a fun option to use. All right. Would you guys add any extra tips there? Anything else? How else would you guys suggest using more Michigan seasonal produce? If you've got anything else to add, please feel free to do so in the chat. Hopefully, we were able to discuss the benefits of eating seasonally and how to do so during the fall and winter months of Michigan. We learned some nutritional value facts about winter vegetables, and hopefully you are walking away from this class learning at least 2 new ideas on how to utilize more winter veggies these coming cold months. So I have one more question for you guys, and that is what is one thing that you learned today that you plan on utilizing in the next week? Either unmute and share with the group, or go ahead and put it in the chat for me. What's one thing you learned today that you will use in the next week? All right, we've got using leftover roasted vegetables in salads. Perfect. Nice to kind of have that roasted vegetable, you know, that increased sweetness from the roasted vegetable flavor on top of a salad. That sounds like a great option. Anything else you guys are going to work on this week? Veggies as my pasta substitute. I mean, they're just so great and versatile. Absolutely. To try the vegetables in a different way with colors in mind, and with roasting them in, oh yes, roasting them in one dish. Absolutely. I hope that works out well for you. I mean, just what a good time saver, not having to wash so many dishes, just throwing them all on there and roasting them. We need to use more vegetables in general. Yes, absolutely, don't we all? It's, you know, 3 cups doesn't sound like a lot when we're talking about eating 3 cups of vegetables per day, but then we think back to what we're doing on a daily basis, and then maybe it's time to reevaluate and say, yeah, I could probably increase my vegetable intake a little bit. We're also gonna have somebody trying their vegetables in a stir fry. So very good. Stir fry is just classic. You can just get whatever type of vegetable in there. So again, I wanted to share with you guys more vegetables and learning the breakdown of the colors you provided. Yes, again, I think our seasonal produce in Michigan really lends itself very well to increasing our red and orange vegetables. So I thought that was quite great, since we have such a big goal of 5.5 cups per week. Very good. All right, so some of the upcoming classes that we have going on in the month of November, and December is a slow month because we don't get a lot of people usually joining in for the month of November or December. So go ahead and take a look at some of these classes here. If any of them are interest to you, you can register right on the bronsonhealth.com website, that link there. And I can put that in the chat as well, but it's where you guys registered for this class essentially. So our next virtual healthy cooking class is going to be next week. As I was mentioning, we're going to be making 2 different Brussels sprouts recipes. We've got a using spices class coming up. If you've got a whole bunch of leftovers, you're not going to want to miss the virtual healthy leftover apples. You're not going to want to miss the virtual healthy cooking class on November 15th with Isabel. We've got a couple of special guests in at the end of November. On November 30th, we have got 2 providers from the Cancer Center talking to us about lung health. So you might not want to miss that if you're interested in that topic. And then we're also going to have a limited license counselor with us in the month of December, and she is going to be speaking on navigating the wintertime blues. So if that is something that you experience, kind of that seasonal depression concept, then you might not have missed that one either. So I very much thank you all so much for joining me today. I appreciate you guys all so much. If you want to complete our survey and give us additional ideas on what you guys would like to hear about in future classes, please feel free to do so. That survey link is in the chat for you guys right now, or the link is also in your email that you received right at then like 8 o'clock this morning, and it was also going to be provided in about a half an hour in part of your follow-up email. So please feel free to share with us what additional topics you would like to hear about. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and stay on with you guys for a few more minutes so you guys can ask additional questions off the recording.